Part 1. The grand chamber of the celestial Concord hung in the silent dark above the gas giant Varelles, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed softly with light from 1,000 alien worlds. Inside, the air was still, thick with the weight of unspoken words and the scent of ozone from the translation fields that hummed around each delegate. Species from across the galaxy sat in tiered rings, their forms as varied as the stars they came from, some with too many eyes, others with none at all, some wrapped in shimmering robes, others armored in chitin or metal. At the center of it all, alone on a small platform, stood two humans. Daniel Carter adjusted the collar of his dark gray uniform, not out of nervousness but habit. He had worn this same style for 20 years, first as a pilot, then as a commander, and now, against his better judgment, as Earth's lead envoy. His face was lined with the kind of weariness that came not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too many hard choices. Beside him, Lena Ortiz stood straight, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She wore no uniform, only a simple navy blue tunic with the Earth Alliance emblem stitched near the shoulder. Her dark eyes moved slowly over the crowd, reading not just words, but the tension in a flick of an antenna, the shift of a scaled shoulder, the tightening of a claw. For 3 months, they had been here. 3 months of talks, of compromises offered and withdrawn, of late-night sessions where hope flickered like a dying lamp. The issue was simple on paper: the Helios expanse, a region of space rich in rare minerals and stable wormholes. It had been declared neutral territory under the Treaty of Zenthra 50 years ago. But 10 years back, human survey ships had found a habitable world there, green, wet, with breathable air and no native intelligent life. They called it New Haven. Within 5 years, 10,000 colonists had settled there. Then 50,000. Then more. The Unified Galactic Coalition saw it as a violation, a breach of sacred agreement. The Velnari, the oldest and most influential species in the Coalition, called it an act of quiet aggression. Their ambassador, Corin Vex, had not raised his voice once during the talks. He did not need to. His presence alone was a warning. Tall and slender, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed faint amber, Corin spoke in a voice that sounded like stone grinding against stone. Every word was measured, every pause deliberate. Today was meant to be the final day. Either humanity would agree to withdraw from New Haven and dismantle its orbital stations in the expanse, or the Coalition would declare the treaty void. There would be no middle ground. That much had been clear since yesterday, when Corin had refused Daniel's request for a 48-hour recess to consult Earth Command. Now, as the chamber lights dimmed slightly, a signal that the session was beginning, Corin rose from his seat. He did not walk to the center. He simply stood where he was, and the acoustics of the room carried his voice to every corner. "The time for words has passed," he said. "Humanity has had its chance. You were given a boundary. You crossed it. You were asked to step back. You refused. Now you ask for more time, as if delay is a form of peace." Daniel stepped forward. "Ambassador, we're not refusing. We're asking for understanding. New Haven isn't a military outpost. It's a home. Families live there. Children were born there. Uprooting them isn't just a political act, it's a human tragedy." "A tragedy you created," Corin replied. "You knew the rules. You chose to ignore them." Lena spoke then, her voice calm but firm. "Rules change when new realities emerge. The treaty was written before any of us knew that world existed. Before we knew it could support life. Isn't the purpose of law to serve life, not the other way around?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded. Others hissed or clicked in disapproval. Corin's expression did not change. "Your sentiment is noted," he said. "But sentiment does not rewrite treaties. The Coalition's position is final. Withdraw all human presence from the Helios expanse within 30 standard days. Dismantle all infrastructure. Surrender navigational logs and terraforming data. Failure to comply will be treated as an act of war." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Daniel looked at Lena. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't argue further." He knew she was right. Pushing now would only make things worse. But something in his chest tightened. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. The memory of standing on the bridge of a warship years ago, watching a colony burn because someone far away had decided it was expendable. He would not let that happen again. "We hear your terms," Daniel said slowly. but we cannot accept them without consulting our government. Earth Command must have the final say. Corin's eyes narrowed slightly. Earth Command has had months to speak. Their silence is answer enough. It is not silence, Lena said. It is caution. They do not wish to escalate. Then they should have acted sooner, Corin said. He turned to the assembly. The human delegation has been given every courtesy. They have used it to delay, not to resolve. I move that the coalition formally declare the Treaty of Zenthra breached by the human species. Effective immediately. Before Daniel could respond, a chime echoed through the chamber, the signal that a formal motion had been entered. Delegates began to vote, their biometric signatures flashing on the central holo display. One by one, the lights turned red. Velnari, Katari, Siltari, even the usually neutral Miri. Only 3 species abstained. None voted in humanity's favor. Corin faced Daniel again. The decision is made. You have 30 days. After that, coalition forces will enter the Helios expanse to restore order. Daniel did not bow. He did not salute. He simply turned and walked away, Lena at his side. The chamber emptied slowly behind them, the whispers growing louder as the humans disappeared into the corridor. Outside, the sky was a swirl of violet and gold, the gas giant below casting long shadows across the station's hull. Daniel leaned against the railing, staring into the void. They think we'll run, he said. Maybe we should, Lena replied softly. He shook his head. Running won't save New Haven, and it won't save us. They'll keep pushing. One boundary today, another tomorrow. Until there's nothing left, she looked at him. What do you think Earth will say? I don't know, he admitted. But whatever it is, it won't be surrender. They stood there a while longer, 2 small figures against the endless dark, as the first stars blinked awake above them. Somewhere far away, on a quiet world called Earth, leaders were gathering in a room deep beneath the mountains, and they were about to send a message the galaxy would never forget. The diplomatic vessel, Aurora's Resolve, drifted in the quiet dark beyond the Varelli system, its engines idling, its comms array pointed toward Earth like a silent prayer. Inside, the air felt heavier than it had during the summit, not because of gravity. Shipboard systems kept that steady, but because of what had been lost. Hope, maybe. Or the illusion of it. Daniel Carter sat alone in the observation lounge, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling on the table beside him. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Corin Vex's face, cold and certain, as if humanity's fate had already been written in stone. Lena Ortiz found him there just before shift change. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap, watching the slow dance of distant stars through the viewport. After a while, she spoke. They're scared, she said. Daniel looked up. Who? The coalition. All of them. They've never seen a species like us. We don't fit their models. We don't act like we're supposed to. He gave a tired smile. Is that a good thing or a bad thing right now? Both, she said. They expected us to beg, or to fight right away. But we asked for time. We showed restraint. That confused them. And when beings like the Velnari get confused, they get dangerous. Daniel nodded. He knew she was right. In his years in the fleet, he'd learned that fear often dressed itself as anger, and anger in the hands of those with power became violence. Back on the ship's main deck, the comms officer, a young man named Eli Ross, was monitoring all open channels. News from the galactic networks poured in like a flood. Most of it was speculation. Some outlets claimed humanity had already begun evacuating New Haven. Others insisted Earth was secretly building warships in hidden shipyards near Jupiter. A few fringe broadcasts even suggested humans were planning to poison coalition water supplies. Lies, all of it. But lies spread faster than truth in times like these. What worried Daniel more was the silence from Earth Command. 48 hours had passed since the summit collapsed. Normally, a coded Priority 1 message would have arrived within 6. The delay meant one of 2 things. Either the lines were being monitored and Earth didn't want to risk sending anything sensitive, or they were still deciding what to do. Neither option was comforting. On Mars, deep beneath the rust-colored, Slopes of Olympus Mons, General Paul Dawson stood in the center of the war room. The chamber was dim, lit only by the soft glow of holographic star maps that floated in mid-air. Around him, officers moved quietly, their faces tight with focus. Reports came in every few minutes. Coalition fleet movements, sensor readings from the outer colonies, supply status from lunar depots. Everything pointed to one conclusion: war was coming. But Dawson wasn't preparing for war. Not yet. He was waiting. The World Senate had been in emergency session for 2 days straight. Presidents, prime ministers, council leaders from every continent and orbital habitat. They were all arguing, negotiating, weighing the cost of peace against the price of pride. And in the end, they would send an order. Dawson just hoped it was the right one. He walked to the far wall, where a simple screen displayed the live feed from the Aurora's resolve. He could see Daniel's face, older now, worn thin by duty. They'd served together once, long ago, on the border skirmishes near Proxima. Daniel had saved his life during a reactor meltdown on the Fortitude. Dawson had never forgotten that. Now he might be the one to send his friend into the fire. The door behind him opened. A woman in a dark blue uniform stepped in. Admiral Ray Brooks, head of Earth's Deep Space Defense Grid. She carried a data slate in one hand. "It's ready," she said. Dawson turned. "The message?" She nodded. "Senate approved it an hour ago. They want it sent directly to the Aurora's resolve. Encrypted, triple-layered. Only Daniel and Lena can decrypt it." "What does it say?" Dawson asked. Brooks hesitated. Not what anyone expected. Dawson raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He knew better than to ask for secrets before their time. Back aboard the Aurora's resolve, the alert chimed softly. A Priority 1 transmission. Earth Command origin. Daniel and Lena met in the secure comms room, the door sealing behind them with a quiet hiss. Eli had already loaded the decryption key. The screen flickered, then cleared. The message wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. But as Daniel read it, his breath caught. Lena read over his shoulder, her fingers tightening on the edge of the console. "It's not a battle plan," she whispered. "No," Daniel said. "It's something else." The message instructed them to return to neutral space near Xylos Prime. There, they were to prepare a special broadcast, one that would use every open frequency, every relay station, every public channel the galaxy used. They were to include historical archives, cultural records, and personal testimonies, not of soldiers or politicians, but of ordinary people, farmers, teachers, doctors, children. The goal wasn't to threaten. It wasn't to plead. It was to show. To make the galaxy understand who humans really were, not just what they could do, but what they had lived through. Lena looked at Daniel. "They want us to tell our story." He nodded slowly. "And if the coalition sees it as weakness? Then they don't understand us at all," she said. Over the next day, they worked without rest. Lena pulled files from Earth's cultural database, images, audio logs, short films. She chose scenes carefully. A woman planting seeds in radioactive soil after the Jakarta floods. A group of teenagers rebuilding a school on Luna after a solar flare. A doctor in Nairobi sharing a vaccine formula with a rival nation during a pandemic. She included the dark moments too, the wars, the mistakes, the pain, but always followed by recovery, by choice, by the stubborn refusal to give up. Daniel coordinated with ship engineers to modify the Odyssey, a science vessel docked nearby. They stripped its weapons, reinforced its broadcast array, and installed a hollow emitter powerful enough to reach every major system in the sector. It would carry no crew except a skeleton team. No shields. No escape plan. Just the message. Eli asked why they didn't send a warship instead. "Because this isn't a fight," Daniel told him. "It's a mirror. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand still and let others see you clearly." As the Odyssey prepared to depart, Daniel stood on the observation deck one last time. The stars looked the same as always. Cold, distant, uncaring. But soon they would carry something new into that darkness. Not a weapon, not a warning, a memory, and maybe, just maybe, a chance. He didn't know if it would work. No one did. But as the engines of the Odyssey hummed to life in the distance, he felt something he hadn't in weeks. Hope. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that grows in silence, like roots in stone. The Odyssey moved through empty space like a whisper, its hull dark, its engines running silent. It carried no weapons, no armor, no hidden fighters, only a message. And the weight of an entire species rested inside its narrow corridors. Captain Nina Patel stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the starfield ahead. She was young for a deep-range command, just 34, but she had been chosen for this mission not for her rank but for her calm. In the fleet, they said she could sleep through a reactor breach. Today, she wasn't sleeping. She was waiting. Beside her, the comms officer, a quiet man named Leo Grant, monitored the final systems check. All broadcast arrays were online. The holo emitter was charged. The data core, loaded with hours of curated human history, was locked and ready. Everything was set. They would arrive at the Xylos Prime relay station in 6 hours. That was the plan. Stop just outside neutral zone boundaries. Activate the emitter. Transmit the message on every open frequency. Then hold position, no matter what happened next. Back on the Aurora's resolve, Daniel and Lena watched the Odyssey's progress from a secure feed. They had argued about sending it alone. Lena had wanted to go with it. Daniel had refused. If something goes wrong, he'd said, someone has to be left to explain why we tried. She hadn't liked it, but she understood. The galaxy didn't know what was coming. Coalition patrols near Xylos Prime had already spotted the Odyssey. At first they assumed it was a scout ship, maybe a decoy. When scans showed no weapons, no military signature, confusion spread through their command channels. Why would humans send an unarmed science vessel into contested space? It made no sense, unless it was a trick. Corin Vex was informed within minutes. He sat in his private chamber aboard the Velnari flagship Dawn's Edge, staring at the image of the small human ship on his screen. He did not react outwardly, but inside doubt stirred. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but not foolish. Sending a lone vessel into enemy territory without protection was either madness or something else entirely. He ordered interceptors to shadow the Odyssey but not engage. Not yet. As the Odyssey crossed into the outer edge of the Xylos system, Leo activated the final sequence. A soft chime echoed through the ship. "Emitter online," he said. "Ready to broadcast on your mark, Captain." Nina took a slow breath. She thought of her parents who had fled rising seas in Mumbai when she was a child. She thought of the first time she saw Earth from orbit, blue, fragile, beautiful. She thought of all the people who had lived, loved, fought, and rebuilt on that little world. This wasn't just a message. It was a gift, and maybe a warning. "Begin transmission," she said. The holo emitter flared to life, not with light but with data. A wave of information surged outward, riding on every known communication band. Radio, quantum link, subspace pulse, even old-fashioned laser comms. It bypassed firewalls, ignored encryption, flooded public and private channels alike. Within seconds, it reached the Xylos relay station. Within minutes, it was echoing across nearby systems. Within an hour, it would be everywhere. On the bridge of the Dawn's Edge, Corin Vex's screen filled with images he did not understand. At first, there was silence. Then a human voice, Lena Ortiz's, spoke in calm, clear galactic standard. "We are not here to threaten. We are here to show you who we are." What followed was not a speech, not a demand. It was a story, the story of humanity. The screen showed black and white footage of men in muddy trenches shivering in the cold, writing letters home. Then color, bright, painful, of cities burning under bombs. A child standing in the ruins of Hiroshima, holding a melted toy. A woman crying over a grave in Sarajevo. A village in Sudan, dust swirling around empty huts after a warlord passed through. Corin frowned. This was not the behavior of a proud species. Why show weakness? Why admit pain? Then the images changed. The same cities, years later, rebuilt. Trees growing through cracked pavement. Children laughing in new schools. Hands planting seeds in scorched earth. A doctor in a makeshift clinic. saving lives with tools made from scrap. A group of strangers pulling each other from floodwaters in Bangladesh. A scientist in Oslo sharing a cure with a nation that had once been an enemy. The message did not glorify war. It did not hide it. It showed both, the darkness and the choice to walk out of it. On a mining colony in the Qatari belt, a grizzled foreman paused his shift to watch the broadcast on a public screen. He had hated humans, called them reckless invaders. But now, seeing a clip of a human miner rescuing a trapped alien crew during a methane explosion on Titan, he felt something shift inside him. In the Miri homeworld's capital, scholars gathered in silent halls analyzing every frame. They had studied human art, music, and math, but never their pain. Now they saw it. And in it they saw something familiar. Back on the Odyssey, the transmission continued. Now came scenes of space. The first human steps on Mars, the repair of a broken alien freighter by a lone Earth ship, the sharing of clean water tech with drought-stricken outposts, and always the faces, tired, hopeful, determined. Then came the final words, spoken not by Lena, but by a recorded message from the World Senate chamber on Earth. The voice was gentle but firm. We do not seek conquest. We never have. We only ask for a place among you. But if you force us to choose between extinction and war, know this. We have walked through fire before, and we did not burn. The transmission ended. The screens across the galaxy went dark for a moment. Then silence. On the dawn's edge, Corin Vec sat very still. For the first time in his long life, he felt uncertain. This was not the act of a species preparing for battle. It was the act of one offering its soul as proof of its worth, and that was more terrifying than any fleet. Nina Patel watched the sensor board. Coalition interceptors still circled the Odyssey, but none moved to attack. Their comms were silent. No threats, no orders, just waiting. She knew the real test was coming, not from weapons, but from understanding. Would they listen? Or would they fear what they could not control? In the quiet of the bridge, Leo turned to her. What now? Nina looked out at the stars. Now, she said, we wait and see if they're brave enough to understand us. The message from the Odyssey spread faster than any weapon ever could. Within a day, it had reached every major system in the unified Galactic Coalition. Within 2, it had leaked into fringe networks, pirate bands, and neutral trade hubs. By the 3rd day, even species that had never heard of Earth were watching it in crowded marketplaces and quiet homes. Some wept, some grew angry. Most simply sat in silence, trying to understand how a species so young could carry so much pain and still reach for the stars. But not everyone saw it as a plea for peace. On the Qatari homeworld, warlords gathered in smoke-filled chambers, calling the broadcast a trick. They show weakness to make us soft, growled General Vrak, slamming a clawed fist on the table. This is human cunning. They want us to hesitate while they arm their colonies. The Qatari High Command agreed. Within hours, their fleet, dozens of jagged obsidian warships, began moving toward the Helios expanse. Their orders were clear. Take New Haven by force. Crush the human presence. Send a message that sentiment does not win wars. Earth's deep space sensors picked up the movement almost immediately. Admiral Ray Brooks stood in the Mars war room, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the Qatari fleet's path. They would reach the outer edge of the expanse in 5 days. She turned to General Paul Dawson. We can't let them take New Haven. Dawson nodded. We're not going to. But what happened next surprised even the humans. Instead of scrambling every available ship into a desperate defense line, Earth Command issued new orders. Evacuate New Haven, not in panic but in calm, careful waves. Every colonist, every piece of irreplaceable data, every child moved to safe zones deeper in human-controlled space. The orbital stations were stripped of weapons and life support, left hollow. The surface habitats were powered down, sealed, and marked with warning beacons. When the Qatari fleet arrived at New Haven, they found no resistance. No soldiers. No last stand. Just empty streets, silent comms, and a single transmission looping from the planet's central relay tower. The same message from the Odyssey, playing over and over on every frequency the Qatari used. General Vrak stared at the empty colony from his command deck, fury boiling in his chest. Where are they? He snarled. Where is the fight? His officers had no answer. Scans showed no hidden ships, no traps, no bombs, just silence. In that message, Always that message. Back on Earth, Daniel and Lena watched the reports from a secure briefing room. They had expected violence. They had prepared for it. But this quiet withdrawal was something else. It was not surrender. It was strategy wrapped in dignity. By leaving New Haven empty, humanity had taken away the Qataris' victory. There was nothing to conquer, nothing to burn, only ghosts and a story playing in the dark. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to happen across the galaxy. Species that had stayed silent during the summit now spoke up. The Miri sent a formal note to the Coalition Council, urging restraint. The gentle Silthuri opened their medical base to any human refugees, even though they had no treaty with Earth. Even some Velnari scholars began questioning Corin Vex's hardline stance. If humans were truly warlike, one wrote in a public forum, why did they show us their wounds instead of their weapons? Corin felt the ground shifting beneath him. He had built his position on the idea that humans were reckless, impulsive, dangerous, but the broadcast and now the empty colony challenged that. It suggested something far more unsettling, that humans understood war better than anyone and had chosen not to start one. Still, the Qatari would not back down. Embarrassed by the empty victory, General Vrak ordered his fleet to push deeper into the expanse, toward the next human outpost, EOS 7. This one, intelligence said, was still occupied, but Earth Command was already ahead of them. As the Qatari warships entered EOS 7's orbit, they found the same thing: silence. Evacuation shuttles had left days ago. The colony's main reactor was still running, but not to power defenses. It had been rewired to feed the broadcast array. Once again, the human message filled the Qatari comms, clear and calm, impossible to ignore. This time, something broke in the Qatari ranks. A junior officer, young and shaken, asked over open channel, "Why do they keep showing us this?" No one answered him, but the question hung in the air like smoke. On Mars, Admiral Brooks watched the Qatari fleet stall in orbit around EOS 7. Their formation was loose now, uncertain. She turned to Dawson. "They're confused." "That's our window," he nodded. "Not to attack, to talk." Earth Command sent a new signal, not to the Qatari but to the neutral systems, the smaller species, the ones who had been watching from the shadows. The message was simple: we are ready to listen. Are you? Within hours, representatives from 7 non-aligned worlds requested a new meeting. They did not want war. They wanted understanding. And for the first time, they saw humanity not as a threat, but as something rare, a species that had known darkness and still chose light. The Qatari tried to stop the talks. They called them betrayal, but even their own allies began to waver. The Velnari Council, under pressure from its own people, announced it would consider a new summit. Not as judges, as equals. Daniel and Lena prepared to leave again, this time not to defend but to build. As their shuttle lifted from the Mars dock, Lena looked out at the red planet below. Do you think they'll listen this time? Daniel thought of the empty streets of New Haven, the looping message in the Qatari comms, the quiet courage of a species that refused to become what others feared. They have to, he said, because if they don't, they'll never understand what we're really offering. And that, more than any weapon, was the most terrifying thing of all. The new summit did not take place in a grand orbital chamber with walls of living crystal. It met instead on a quiet habitat station orbiting Proxima Centauri, built by traders and maintained by no single government. The rooms were plain, the chairs simple, the air smelling faintly of recycled oxygen and old coffee. There were no towering thrones or glowing banners, just a round table, soft lighting, and beings from 12 different worlds sitting side by side, some for the first time without suspicion in their eyes. Daniel Carter and Lena Ortiz arrived early. They wore no uniforms this time. Daniel in a dark jacket and plain trousers, Lena in a soft gray tunic with a small earth pin at the collar. They did not sit at the head of the table. They took 2 empty seats near the middle as equals. One by one, the others came. A Miri elder with skin like folded parchment and eyes full of quiet wisdom, a young Silthari diplomat whose bioluminescent markings pulsed gently with each breath. Even a Qatari representative, not a general, but a historian named Trell, chosen by his own people after weeks of heated debate. And finally, Corin Vex. He walked in alone, his obsidian form casting a long shadow, but his posture was different now. Less rigid, less certain. No one spoke at first. The silence was not heavy this time. It was patient, waiting. Then Lena leaned forward slightly. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was calm, warm, without blame. "We know this wasn't easy." Corin looked at her. "You showed us your past. Why?" "Because peace isn't built on secrets," she replied. "It's built on truth. Even the painful parts." Trell, the Qatari historian, shifted in his seat. "My people thought your message was a trick. We believed you were hiding weapons behind tears. But when we found your colonies empty, we realized you were not hiding anything. You were showing us your choice." Daniel nodded. "We've fought wars. Many of them. We know what victory looks like when it's bought with blood, but we also know what comes after. Ruins, orphans, silence. We didn't want that for you, or for us." A murmur passed through the group. Not of doubt, but of understanding. The talks lasted 3 days. Not with demands or ultimatums, but with questions. The Miri asked how humans healed after great loss. The Silthari wanted to know how Earth shared technology without expecting control in return. Even Corin asked quietly why humans had not retaliated when the Qatari moved on New Haven. "Because revenge doesn't feed children," Daniel said, "and it doesn't grow crops on dead soil. We chose to protect our people, not to prove a point." Slowly, carefully, a new agreement began to form. Not a treaty of borders and punishments, but a framework of cooperation. Human terraforming teams would help restore worlds damaged by old wars. Earth's medical archives would be shared freely. In return, the coalition would recognize human colonies as sovereign, not as violations but as partners. The Helios expanse would remain open to all, not just a few, but the most important part came on the final morning. As the group prepared to sign the documents, Lena placed a small data chip on the table. "This contains more than laws," she said. "It contains stories. From every human world. From farmers, teachers, artists, and children. We offer it not as proof of our worth, but as a bridge." Corin picked up the chip. He held it like something fragile. "You trust us with this?" "We trust you to see us as we are," she said. "Not perfect. Not innocent. But trying." He nodded slowly. For the first time, something like respect flickered in his amber eyes. When the signing was done, no one cheered. There were no grand speeches. Just quiet handshakes, soft words, and the hum of the station's life support keeping them all alive in the void. As Daniel and Lena walked back to their shuttle, they passed a window overlooking the stars. The same stars that had watched empires rise and fall, wars begin and end. "They'll remember this," Lena said. "Not just them," Daniel replied. "Us too. We almost forgot who we were." This reminded us. Back on Earth, people gathered in cities and villages, on orbital platforms and lunar farms, watching the live feed of the signing. There were no parades, no fireworks. Just a quiet sense of relief, like the first breath after holding it too long. In the months that followed, human ships began appearing not with weapons, but with seeds, medicine, and engineers. Coalition vessels, once seen as threats, now docked at human stations for repairs and trade. The Qatari even sent a delegation to New Haven, not to conquer it, but to help rebuild it together. The war that never happened became a lesson. Not just for the galaxy, but for humanity itself. Strength was not just in firepower. It was in the courage to be seen, to show your scars and still offer your hand. The new agreement was not called a treaty. They named it the Accord of Shared Fire, because fire could destroy. Yes, but it could also warm, light the way, forge something new from what was broken. And as the first joint human Velnari science station rose above Mars, its lights joining the stars, the galaxy understood something it had missed before. Peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the presence of trust. And trust, once earned, was the hardest thing in the universe to break.